The best way to do it is to kind of work with the institutions, work with what I got, kind of like how I'm making this trash look like fashion. Is this fashion? Hi, I'm Romi, and you're watching Sensitive Roots, where I talk about whatever is not being talked about in professional settings that especially pertains to Black, Latina, Indigenous, queer, and or trans people. Yeah. Sensitive Roots is really for anyone that finds this useful, but I am designing it for queer and or trans, Black, Latina, Indigenous people trying to not just survive in professional settings, but also thrive in them. And it's also for our allies that want to support us in those efforts. So I am a non-binary, trans-feminine person. I'm also a plant molecular biologist, involved in a lot of outreach work and in the queer nightlife community as a drag persona. If you want to know more about who I am and what I do and what I care about, I already made a video about that here. I kind of exist at this intersection where I don't really know anyone else that does, and that kind of makes me a unicorn, which gets me in trouble a lot of the time, but also means that I have, I think, some really important insight. I'm always trying to find creative ways to make these institutions, which are, they have a violent history of very intentionally excluding people like me and other people of similar identities and experiences, how to make those institutions work for me. Which sounds pretty difficult. And that's why I'm making these videos. Lately in academia, I've seen more and more talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, justice efforts, and as a queer person of color, I'm obviously very excited about those efforts and in those conversations, but the conversation never gets to me or to my communities that I intersect in. Yes, we'll talk about being an LGBTQIA+ person in academia, but we'll often talk about it very vaguely, where we'll center white experiences, heteronormative experiences, American experiences. And yes, we might talk about being a Latina person, a Black person, an Indigenous person, but we won't really talk about queer people that are also of those identities. And so that's important. I mean, intersectionality is important, right? And we always hear intersectionality is so important, but we never actually get to those intersectional conversations. Meanwhile, Black, Indigenous, and Latina, queer and trans people are really disproportionately suffering from sexual violence, homelessness, lack of access to health, mental and physical resources. It's sad, and I know this, not just from the statistics, but I also see it in my community. These are questions that I hear all the time. Why aren't these people participating in these institutions? Why don't they stick around? What can we do to make it more interesting for them, or more useful for them, or safer for them? And so I think there's a lot of conversations that need to happen about all pertaining to those intersections that are critical for us to reimagine these institutions. And so we just want to survive, we want to thrive, we want to celebrate ourselves, and we want you to do that with us. But to do that, you need to understand how our institutions participate in that systemic violence, and how you can reimagine those institutions or come up with completely new ones that we can survive in together. And I also just want to celebrate, celebrate how fun it is to be at those intersections. And so what Sensitive Roots is going to be looking like is I'm going to be inviting people to talk about what it's like being us. I'm going to talk about whatever my opinion is on issues that I think are related to being at this intersection. And you will learn, I hope, that it pertains to you. Not just because you're an ally, but because I want you and you want you to be free, right? So I chose the name Sensitive Roots because oftentimes, and if you're a sissy, a feminine person, a queer person, you'll get called sensitive because you're very in touch with your emotions or very perceptive of things that people don't want you to talk about or acknowledge. Being sensitive is kind of a negative thing. It's like it has a negative connotation associated with it, and I wanted to reclaim sensitive. Really, as a molecular biologist, when I think of a cell as being sensitive, I think of it like sensitive to a molecule, for example. I think of it as kind of acknowledging that this molecule exists and it's here, hey. And roots, well, because I'm a plant biologist, so I don't know. But also roots as being kind of like the foundations of a plant institution. Also the part of the plant that goes unseen or ignored. So sensitive, acknowledge, roots, the unheard, and the unspoken of and the ignored. So I hope to bring to the light those things that we're just not talking about that we should really be talking about. Welcome to Sensitive Roots. Yay! Ooh. Ooh. I really am wearing trash. Okay. Bye.